Welcome to PacWest Bigfoot. This is David. And real quick, before I give you guys some updates with PacWest Bigfoot, just want to introduce Joe. Joe, you can hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can. That is awesome. And Joe is,
All right.
this is going to be an interesting, fun little 45 minutes to an hour here on PacWest Bigfoot this week. And just some updates real quick. Got some other interviews. This interview this week coming out. It's going to be a pretty busy day here in the old PWB. And let me turn off my phone here real quick. Oh, yeah. So they can just leave a message. So anyways, it's going to be a really busy week here with PacWest Bigfoot. I do have that resources page coming out later on this week. Any other news in the PacWest Bigfoot? No, I am going on a father-son camp with our church. Around the 20th or 23rd or something, the third weekend of this month. And I'll tell you what, we're going to get out there. I was going to bring my camera. We're going to do some train knocks for the fun of it, for a couple hours late at night, me and my boys. So I'll bring that recording back to you. Okay. Sound good? And I'll load it up for all of you. So right now, I don't want to waste any more time. I want to actually get in here and we're going to start talking with Joe here. Now, Joe, you are a part of, or do you actually run the Western New York Bigfoot organization out there?
Yeah. Actually, to be honest, I am the Western New York Bigfoot Research
Nice.
Organization. Yes.
Well, not much longer, man. If for you guys out here in the PacWest Bigfoot world who don't live in the PacWest, but you live on the East Coast, and you are the East, the East Bigfoot crew, I suggest you maybe contact Joe. You can contact him through me here. Find it out there on their Facebook page, and on his Facebook page, and get connected there and start working together and start. Doing some research together and everything. We could all, I'm sure Joe could use your help as well, getting out here and doing that. So, Joe,
Definitely.
what
Yes.
brought you into this whole Bigfoot world?
You probably won't be surprised to find out that, like many others, it was the Patterson-Gimlin film shot back in 1967. Now,
Awesome.
I was actually born, of course, in 64, so I was only 3 years old when that film came out. I didn't actually see it until I was about 14 years old. And I saw that film when I was 14 and immediately captured my imagination. And, of course, being a kid, I didn't know, I could look at it. Children sometimes are more intuitive, I think, than adults are. And even back then, even as a 14-year-old boy, I saw that film, and immediately I knew this was something new, and it was a Bigfoot. It was not a man in a monkey suit. I could immediately recognize that.
Yeah.
After I saw that, my plans were to actually run away from home at the time and go to Bluff Creek, but that didn't work out. So I spent a lot of time in the woods.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time out in the woods. That's where I grew up, basically, right here in Western New York and in the rural areas, lots and lots of forest. And I'm running around. And I had started doing research, as soon as I saw that. I started, of course, back then, you don't have internet, you couldn't Google stuff, but I started devouring anything Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and just started basically research then as a kid. And I had noticed after a while, I developed an idea in my head, maybe I don't have to run away to Bluff Creek to see a Bigfoot. Maybe there's a Bigfoot right here in New York State. My reasoning for that was I originally thought that they had probably migrated from Canada, and any state bordering Canada was likely to contain this species. So that's really how it started out, is with Patterson and Gimlin.
Oh, nice, nice. And I'm going to kind of throw this up here so everybody can kind of see my screen here in just a second. I'll throw this up. This is, whoops, wrong one. There we go. This is kind of the Google Maps for out here, out in the, so the Finger Lakes area of Western New York. Could you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is, you're kind of out there in that Finger Lakes kind of area of Western New York. Is that what it's called out there?
Yep. The Finger Lakes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I can see here just by the highway, the US 7 that just runs right up through there. This is just thick old forest. You know, it doesn't seem as maybe as mountainy as mountainous as the Pacific Northwest, but I'll tell you what, this looks just as thick a forest as any that I've seen. So I mean, this is
Yeah.
thick tree
Yeah.
and
And
brush.
I mean, there is a lot. As a matter of fact, there is a trail, and it is called the Finger Lakes Trail, and it runs from the border of Pennsylvania and New York in Allegheny, all the way out east to the Catskill Forest Preserve on the eastern side of the state. And it's a 980-mile trail, and most of it is through forest. I mean, some of it goes through farmlands and little towns, but most of it is forest. And yeah, so there's plenty of cover for a species like Bigfoot to exist here in this state.
Wow. Yeah, I can see this just nothing but rolling hills and thick forest up in here. That is pretty awesome. So, can you share with me like any encounters, any sort of evidence, anything like that that you have, and just a few, and go ahead and go into detail where you know what you were doing, some of the general areas,
Hmm.
some of the things that you kind of observed, maybe like just three of the most spectacular moments that you've had out there in your research.
Sure. Well, actually, the first one was kind of minor, and but it was still something that kept me going. And it was shortly after seeing that film and deciding that as a kid, 14, that I was going to find Bigfoot and prove to the world that the species existed. As I mentioned, I spent a lot of time in the woods as a kid. I was constantly running around the woods
Mhm.
here. And one day, and oddly enough, I didn't even really have Bigfoot on my mind that day as I was running around the woods. I got into this area, and it was pretty, well, I say remote. There's no houses around. There's nothing but a creek and a very, very thick area of pine. And if you ever come to New York State, you'll notice that these forests are made up of a combination of hardwoods, pines, etc. And so you'll have sections where you'll have nothing but just like really thick stands of pines. And I was in one of those areas, and I came across this. Well, it was a huge structure, and I wasn't exactly sure what it was. I thought it was kind of curious, but as I got closer, I could see it was. I started referring it to it as a wood igloo because it looked like it was a dome, but it was made out of pine, pine branches and et cetera. And it was actually, this thing, of course, originally, I mean, my first thought was actually somebody built a cool little fort out here.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got up to the thing, there was this god awful stench coming from this thing.
Any
A skunk.
comparisons with the stench? Like it stunk like people have said like onions and meat.
Yeah, and I've smelled dead animals like dead deer, dead,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it was I wouldn't even compare it to a dead animal. To me, this smelled like a cross between a kind of like a wet dog and like some really bad somebody with really, really bad body odor, you know.
Oh, hippie.
Yeah, kind of like that.
Sorry, hippies.
And
Just a joke.
yeah, really. I'll tell all the
I'm
hippies
from
out there.
Oregon. Come on. I'm from
Yeah.
Oregon.
But yeah, so it was really bad smell, and I'd never smelled anything like that. Now, my original intent was to, you know, I'm going to crawl in here and check it out. But I smelled that smell, and I'm like, I'm not going in there. So I left basically. Fast forward to me figuring, well, what in the heck could have built that? Because it could have only been built by two things: either a person or a critter with hands. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Either Bigfoot or a person built this. So, but I started trying to find out, okay, what kind of animal could build a thing like that besides humans? And then I came across some stuff on Bigfoot and found out that there had been people that had found similar structures to this. And I saw pictures of nests, and I even saw one that looked pretty close to what I had discovered. And this thing was pretty big. I mean, you know, we're used to talking about, you know, we know these things are very large as adults, and this thing could have easily accommodated an adult Sasquatch, you know, 8 foot tall, you know. I mean, it could have easily crawled in and out of there very, very easily, and probably would have lived there very comfortably. Apparently one was, from the smell anyway. So I was very excited. And then I was like, okay, now I know that there are Bigfoot in New York State, because there's a nest there and there's a smell. And I went back to it, and of course, it was still there. The smell was still there. Mm-hmm. And that was the same day when I had returned to see that nest along the creek in a kind of a silty, sandy spot. I saw half of a footprint, the very front part. And it was very, very distinct. You could see, and it was very deep. You could make out 5 toes, a very broad 4 foot, and then the rest of it was up off of, apparently, when it had stepped, you know, the heel part was on more firmer ground. So only the front part of the foot. Now, of course, back then I knew nothing about plaster of Paris. Didn't have a camera, of course, as a kid, but it impressed me. I knew that was a big footprint. Yeah. And so that was the very first time that it just solidified with me that, man, these things really do exist. Nice. Now, fast forward about 20 years. And this was the most significant encounter, if you'd like to use that word, that I've ever had. And it actually did not take place here in New York. It was actually when I was in Virginia. And I had been camping in this one area, and it's in George Washington National Forest, basically. It's a huge, huge area there in the Shenandoahs. And I'd been camping, and while I was camping around, of course, I'm still doing research whether or not it's in my home state or not. Anywhere I go that involves the woods, I'm always looking for evidence, right? So I'm camping this one time, and I did it.
I can go fly fishing for, you know, anywhere, and it's just like, I'll look around. I'll be very aware.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to. After a while, it just becomes like second nature to you. Yeah. You know, and sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. But at least for me, anyway, I'll be somewhere out in the woods, and for a totally different reason, like I'm just camping with family, and the next thing I know, I'm somewhere and I'm going, oh, wait a minute, I'm looking for Bigfoot evidence now here, you know, not even realize I'm doing it. But nice. So I've been camping. I'm camping in this area, and I'm taking some day hikes. Now, I had found tree structures in this area, classic tree structures, just like I've seen. I don't know how many pictures you've seen of them that people have taken, but the obvious tree structure, it was constructed. It wasn't, nature forming this. These trees were placed there on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Huge pyramidal type tree structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, there's got to be some squatching here. So I'm camping. Well, I had some friends, two of them that, they teased me a lot. Oh, Bigfoot, blah, blah, blah. Their minds weren't totally closed to the idea, but they didn't quite believe. So I told them, I said, look, guys, you don't believe me. You're always teasing me. I can take you to a camping spot where I'm pretty sure Bigfoots hang out. And, of course, they're laughing. Yeah, sure, whatever. At least it'll be an excuse to go out and have a good time in the woods, get drunk and camp, right? So I take them out to this spot. Now, of course, I have no idea if anything is really going to happen at all. All I'd found was a tree structure. And so we set up camp. We get there during the day. And this is pretty far out in George Washington National Forest. You have to park your vehicle, and then we had to hike in, I don't know, about a mile and a half to this camping spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a clearing, and all around the clearing, of course, is just trees. It's like a big clearing in the middle of a forest. And so we set up camp, and we're just hanging out, during the day. I'm taking them around. We're walking out in the woods a little bit, just looking for evidence, whatever we could find, footprints, whatever. These guys are just thinking it's all a big joke. And I'm like, okay. So we get back to camp, and it was getting, right around dusk. The sun was starting to go down. Still a little bit of light. And that's when I heard the very first knock. It was a very, very loud knock, and it was very distinctive. You can tell it was wood on wood.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked over at my two friends, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "That's one." And so off in a different direction, you hear another knock, as if an answer. Then two more knocks from the original position, and then one knock again from the other direction. And I said, well, there you go, guys. My one friend had the audacity to go, "It's woodpeckers, man. Woodpeckers.
At night?
At dusk, right?" Woodpeckers. Wow. Okay, so that's what it started out with just these knocks. And so as it's getting a little bit darker, we didn't hear anything for a while. The knocks stopped. Next thing we know, we're sitting around. We had our little fire going, and a pine cone, because there's a lot of pine trees in this area. It's a mixture of pine and hardwoods, maples, and things of that nature. A pine cone comes sailing in and hits the side of a tent. And after that one, then two more, then three more, then just a fuselage, basically, is what I would call it, of pine cones just coming in and landing in our area, hitting the tents and et cetera, and then a whoop. And I can't even, but it's a sound that I've heard that other people have recorded, a vocalization. I can't do it, but it was more of a whoop, whoop, whoop kind of thing. And I looked at them, and their eyes were huge. And I said, well, what kind of animal do you think can throw a pine cone besides a person? And so from that point on, there was a lot of, and I forget to mention the smell. Mm-hmm. You could smell these creatures. You could smell them. And it was the same type of smell that I had smelled in New York when I was 14 years old. Same exact thing. And they made a lot of vocalizations. There was a lot of whoops, and one would answer in another direction. And I estimate there was like probably about 3 of them at least, I think. And they were just inside the trees, I'd say about 100 yards away. And they made a lot of noise. There was a lot of tree snapping, tree shaking, and vocalizations. Now, I had heard that, I'm sure you're familiar with the Ohio howl that has been recorded.
Yeah.
I've heard that before, both here in New York and also when I was in Virginia. Now, they didn't do any howls that night, and I'm not sure if that's because they use that for a long-distance communication type thing, but they were making more whoops and kind of what I describe as barks, kind of, because one of them...
I like the bark thing. Real quick, hate to interject this, but the whoop, I get the whoop, whoop, whoop. I've heard those before, but sometimes, and I've been noticing this frequently from little reports I find and people sending them in to me and then turning them into campfire stories like I do. I've been noticing that people have been using the word bark, so I'm using their word bark in there because it's a very different sound than a whoop. A bark is different.
It is, totally.
And I've been noticing that rather frequently recently.
Yeah.
So
and this bark, I can't even come close to it. I checked it out one time. In fact, it was just recently because I'd heard the same type of noise here again last year, and I looked it up online, and it's to me, I guess it's similar, but then it's not exactly the same as. I looked up what it sounded like if a gorilla would bark, and you can look it up. Very kind of similar to that, but this was like very deep, very guttural. And you often hear people say, you know what, I felt it more than anything else. And you could. This one was, and I can never do it justice, but it was a bark. It was like a, but I'm not even,
nice.
Like I said, I can't even, it was very deep and vibrating, and you felt it in your chest. When this thing was making this noise. And so this is going on, and then it goes silent. And I turned to look at my buddies. They had packed their stuff and were heading out. And I said, where are you guys going?
Wusses.
And they said, that's it, we're done. We don't know what this is. We're out of here. And so I let them go. I actually stayed. Now, obviously, anybody hearing this account would say, well, they obviously wanted you to leave. But me, I'm like, I have spent, a good 40 years now trying to get these things on film, on video, and actually wanting to see one. I have never actually seen one. I have heard them and smelled them, and I have caught maybe what you would call a glimpse, but I can't go, well, that was a Bigfoot, because the glimpse that I caught, well, it could have been something else. But that night,
what was that glimpse, though?
That was it.
That was it? Okay.
Well, when at that time when we were camping, they would not let us see them. I mean, I was shining a flashlight into the trees, and when you see that shirt that says "Hide and Seek Champion of the World," it's a very deserved title for them, because if they don't want you to see them, you are not going to see them, and that's just it. I mean, they're very adept at it. And I know they were there. They were making a lot of noise, and I know what direction. I was shining a light, but you could not see a thing. You couldn't see them moving around. Nothing. I mean, And I'm like, come on, show yourselves. And that's why I was like, no, I know they're here. Those guys left. But I'm like, I'm staying because you know what? Maybe I'm taking a chance that a really big male is going to get really mad at me and maybe try to harm me. But you know what? I'm going to take that chance because I've spent all this time, and you know, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. And I think I even said that, you know, out loud to the woods and to them. I was like, I'm not leaving. So I stayed there, and you know, they never attacked me. I did at about 2:00 in the morning. I think I was asleep in my tent, and about 2:00 in the morning, I heard some wood knockings, but they were kind of distant. They were a little further away than 100 yards, like when they were around our camp. And I did hear those, but they sounded like they were, and it actually did it for quite a bit. They would knock, and then a few minutes later, you hear an answering knock, and then a few minutes after that, you'd hear another knock, but it was further, and it sounded like the knocks were getting further and further away. And then that was it. I woke up the next morning, and you know, they hadn't, like, as far as I know, come into the camp and disturbed anything, and they didn't try to molest me. But that was like such a profound experience for me, that if I had, and I didn't, but if I'd had any kind of doubts as to whether I was looking for an actual species or just a total made up myth, that totally got rid of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
So when I tell people, you know what, you have the right not to believe that this species exists, but I happen to know that it does. And so that was pretty much my major experience. Now, you wanted one more. Well, the third one, again, I was down here, and I've got a research area here because, excuse me, I've gone online, and I was checking out where reports of Bigfoot sightings had been in New York State. And actually, the Bigfoot Research Organization has a really good page there that shows pretty much Bigfoot sightings for every state in the country, and when they were, and et cetera.
Yeah, they've had that stuff logged in there for a while on that website. Yeah.
So I was checking out. I checked out. Now, of course, I think the sighting, well, it happened in the 90s, so it was a little while ago. But I thought, well, you know what? These things probably don't travel that far, and if there was a sighting there back then, they're probably still in the area. So I always check it out. And the one area that I'm going to now, I started checking it out because it was very close to that area where the sighting was. And so I just started checking out this state forest, taking day hikes, seeing what I could see. And I have found footprints in there. In fact, I think I put one on my Facebook page last year. It's kind of indistinct, but it's unmistakably a print, not human, not a bear. It wasn't castable, but it was very, you know, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever after looking for these things and all the research and seeing everything that everybody else is, you know, the footprint cast and et cetera. And it's pretty unmistakable that it was a footprint. So that was the first thing I found. I thought, okay, maybe I've struck pay dirt here. And then I did find tree structures in there. And one day I was hiking, and I was along this trail, and I was actually looking down for some reason. I almost ran into it. And I looked up and just like almost ran into it. Right in front of my face was this huge X right across the trail, made from trees. One was bent and then there was another one that was used to stick in the. It was pretty big size tree, but it had been pulled up from somewhere, and it formed an X right across the middle of the trail. And I thought, well, now that's interesting, because I know people have found very similar things. Now, what they mean, I don't know. Whether it means don't go past this X, or what kind of sign it is, because I'm thinking, well, if it says it can't be don't go past, because what if I was coming in the other direction, So, but for whatever reason, there's this big X, and I'm like, well, that was, somebody did that. That's not windfall. That's not the wind blowing trees to make an X that perfect, and to where it's just like perfectly blocking the trail. So, I looked over the wintertime, and I'm not sure if they're actually in this area. I think they may have a winter area they go to, because this winter was very quiet out there. I did a little bit of research in that area in this winter. This winter was very cold, so I went out a few times, and I didn't really see any kind of changes at all in the area. And of course, no footprints in the snow. So I'm like, well, maybe they're just not here during this time of year. So, but I do know that they habituate that area. I mean, just from the evidence that I've found, that I've seen, I'm pretty sure that there's, it could be one. I don't know if they're solitary. That's the only thing I haven't figured out in 40 years, whether sometimes they're solitary. I think they usually live in family groups. So
I think they live in groups as well. I do think I kind of follow a little bit along the line of William Jevning, where males will simply live a little outside of the group alone. I think that young males, of course, move on to create their own family group. I think that happens. Kind of like primates do that same thing. And so I follow along that line. So,
and that's the thing is, a lot of people, they they get caught into this thing as to, well, are they part human and part? I do believe they're primates.
Yeah, me too. As you know, I'm a creationist. I totally believe these things are purely physical. They're primates. I just think that they have been here a long time, and I'm like you also in the fact that I believe that there is a much bigger number of them than a lot of folks suggest. They suggest around the thousands of them within North America, and I'm thinking a couple score thousand or more of them within.
Oh yeah. I mean, it has to, because a lower number like that just could not account for the reports of these things in almost every state now. And if a good number of those accounts can be believed, which I think a great many of them can be believed, that would mean there has to be more than what a lot of people may think there are. I mean, just to keep up a breeding population, you would have to have a good number of the species. And people just don't realize they're just and they go, well, if there's that many of them, why aren't they seen more often? And it's like, well, these things are very secretive, man. Look, there are areas where mountain lions exist and you don't see them because mountain lions are very secretive. They are normally, of course, being a big cat. I am pretty sure they're nocturnal, but you don't see them yet. They exist, but you don't just see them running across the road in front of your car or whatever. It's the same type of thing. You may catch a glimpse of one every now and then. So I think the numbers are a lot higher than.
But got another 5 or 10 minutes here. What's your basically your future going forward with the Western New York Bigfoot organization? And would you like to have some other folks helping in on the research, and where can they go to contact you and all of that? I did put your Facebook page up here, so if you can just kind of share a little bit about what you're going to be doing going forward, and where people can contact you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm going to continue in this area that I have been going in. I'm hoping that I'm going to get a lot of activity now that it's getting towards summertime. So,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I'm also going to be checking out some other places around here in New York. If I can get permission to go on some private land at times, because a lot of these reports that I've seen, I haven't been able to actually go investigate them because
Hmm.
some of it is, on somebody's land, and it's kind of
Yeah.
awkward going up to a door and saying, "Hey, there was a Bigfoot report, so you mind?" People kind of tend to look at you strange sometimes. So,
That's
but
okay.
if
I
I
don't
can
mind.
gain access,
I never
yeah,
mind looking strange. Look at me.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
good.
But if I can gain access to some of these areas, I'm going to start checking them out. I just had a person I'm acquainted with from this area telling me that he was never a believer in Sasquatch, but he actually told me one day that he thinks he got ran away from his fishing by a Bigfoot,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and it occurred basically on private land. So I said, well, look, get me permission to go on that property, and I want to go check it out. Because he said, yeah, it was shaking trees, and it was threw a couple of rocks in his direction, and it was making some weird noises. He said that he'd never seen, and he said he caught a glimpse of this thing, and he said it was huge. He said, and I know this guy is not just, he's not just messing with me or anything. I could see in his face that he was kind of reliving the whole experience, and it scared the hell out of him.
Yeah. Intense.
But yeah, and if people, and I've put it up on my page before. I mean, hey, I'm always looking for people that are interested in going out and doing research
Okay.
with me. And there's a phone number on my page, and I think, well, actually, it's my original. I mean, it's my personal number here.
Okay.
So they can always contact me that way. They can always put it on the page also if they're interested.
Hmm.
But definitely, yeah, if I could, hook up with people that are more interested, more the merrier.
Okay.
And it makes it easier also on us as researchers if we have other people researching, because you can come up with twice as much evidence.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So
Awesome.
um,
Right
but
on.
and I've never been like the guy that I'm not looking to prove. I'm not. Hey, look at me! I finally came up with the money shot. I'm not doing that. I'm
Yeah.
just researching this, and I hope someday somebody does. You know,
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for being on here, man. That was awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, it was great.
And
It was great.
what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, we'll keep in touch. I just liked your page on Facebook. I shared that. Everybody saw that on there. It's Western Bigfoot, Western New York Bigfoot organization. Guys out there on Facebook, you can also search it in the search box. They got a good algorithm there, so we'll be able to ring that up. But once the summer is over, I'd like to bring you back here and kind of go over anything, any interesting experiences or more, um, you know, signs and things like that that you've come across, if you don't mind.
Sure, that'd be great.
Awesome,
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, so
that would
and
be
I'll be
great.
following you along on your Facebook, and don't be afraid to share any of your findings over on PacWest Bigfoot. If you message me any of the findings and stuff like that, I'd love to share that up on the Facebook so everybody can see it. Okay,
Oh, great. Yeah, sure. I'll
awesome.
do that.
Okay,
I will do that.
all right, that sounds great. Thank you very much, Joe. And for those of you guys here at
Thank you.
PacWest Bigfoot, just hang on a second there, Joe. Just want to say
Sure.
thank you guys for being a part of the community here, enjoying all of those based on true encounter stories, and all of the real interviews here with these folks, like Joe here, who are out here doing the research. It's kind of one of the reasons I like to do all these. Create these stories around real encounters is to give you guys something to do and listen to whenever you're not out there on the trail or out in the bush trying to find this thing. So, anyways, with that, from the beautiful Pacific Northwest and PacWest Bigfoot, God bless, and I'll talk to you soon.